Thanks. Hey, thank you for letting me join you this morning. My name is John Schulz. I'm with the AT&T Sustainability Group. So I have a checkered past with AT&T, including some time with real estate. And when I was looking at the speakers here and looking at the people who are in the audience, I sort of feel like I'm coming home. While I am not an engineer and really have never even played one on TV, I've worked with a lot of them. And so please be gentle. Understand that I can sort of talk the talk, but I've worked with a lot of great engineers, but I've never actually walked the walk. So I'm really here to tell a story. And Kate mentioned a little bit about how we've worked together with Environmental Defense Fund, but I'm gonna go ahead and even go back before we started work and talk a little bit about AT&T and what we do, right? We obviously bring a lot of mobility, we bring a lot of devices to the marketplace that help you live a connected world, all of that good stuff. But it requires a lot of infrastructure to make that happen. Lots of buildings, lots of equipment. No surprise, we use a lot of energy to make that happen. And we've been working very aggressively on a lot of things you'll talk about here, about energy efficiency and incorporating renewables into our portfolio and all of that good stuff. But a few years ago, we realized, as we've all realized, that water and energy are related, that water resources are under stress, that public demands for the use of water are growing, that we need to figure this thing out. And so I was given the opportunity to start working with our real estate folks to do just that. And as Kate mentioned, we made some good progress. On the next slide, I'll show you a few of the results or some of our preliminary findings. But we realized we needed some help. We have an AVP of energy. We have lots of great engineers within our facilities management organization. But in my role as a sustainability guy, a lot of times what I do is try to push the business beyond where we currently are. And so I looked around and realized that Environmental Defense Fund brings not only expertise from a technical nature. They've brought in some wonderful technical resources that really helped us with understanding how the water process works. But they also bring in good old-fashioned business savvy, which is ironic because NGOs, non-government organizations, aren't typically thought of as being business savvy, but EDF certainly is. And the reason I say it is they are great at understanding business and understanding what motivates business, and then push them a little bit further than maybe they thought they would go. And so in terms of helping us work our management, with our management to get buy-in, in terms of working with them to understand why it's important, working with them to understand how we can set goals to motivate us towards progress, this is kind of the function that Environmental Defense Fund brought to the table. And it worked great. So I'll tell you a little bit about that, and I'll tell you a little bit about how AT&T's journey went from understanding water is important, and there may be some relation to energy there, to having a robust set of tools that we use, that we hope you will use, and goals that are helping to motivate us to make progress. So it's going to be a story, and then I'm also going to ask you to write something down and go check it out after you're done here, because I think part of the thing that we delivered together, AT&T and EDF, is something that we hope all of you will be able to use. So that's enough about the collaboration. Let's get into some of the details. So we started back really in 2010, and said, okay, we got to figure out how much water we use. 3.3 billion gallons. We went and we ran through all of our facilities, we ran through all the bills, we did the unit of measure matchup, we figured it all out, 3.3 came out the other end. Is that a lot? We weren't really sure. We looked at it compared to some of the big heavy hitters in water, and compared to obviously what energy, what ag, what the big water users use, it wasn't that big, but nonetheless, it's 3.3 billion gallons of water that we were pouring into our operations. So we figured out, well, let's look a little bit deeper at how that footprint is spread out across our building portfolio. And first thing we did, we looked at money. And when you talk about water, everyone agrees, yes, it's important. We drink it, we bathe in it, it's critical to life, all that good stuff. But it's so cheap. How do you make a business case to make efficiency important when it's so darn cheap? And so we started digging at that, and we said, sure enough, compared to our energy expenses, it's less than 2%. It's tough to get people's attention for that with that dollar amount. So we're like, well, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough. But let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's dig at it and let's see what we find out. So we looked at then our portfolio, and what we found was there were 125 buildings, which is a lot, but compared to our total portfolio, it was a relatively small amount. But those 125 facilities represented half of our water. And we were like, well, that's interesting. Why is that? So we started scratching it some more. We built a basic toolkit to understand what are people doing. We surveyed those buildings, what's going on in those buildings. And they're all the usual suspects were there, right? We had bathrooms and faucets and fixtures that you could think about. Irrigation was a big deal. But all these suckers had heavy cooling loads. And they all used cooling water to fill in those cooling towers and keep that cooling going. So that's it, right? That's the common thread. That's what's pushing these buildings to use a bunch of water. Then we looked at them from an energy perspective. Surprise, surprise, these buildings also used a lot of energy, right? So we found our set, right? This was our data set. We went from thousands of buildings down to 125 buildings to focus on, right? And so we skidded it down, and we started scratching at that a little bit more. We also found that of those 125, 31, now because of the drought conditions, is up to 36 of these buildings were in severe drought locations. And you can figure out where those are, right? You live in a lot of them. Think California, think Texas, think Arizona. These are places where water is a big deal. So that was our opportunity, right? 125 down to 31. And then as Kate said, in traditional buildings, maybe a quarter of water goes towards cooling. We have a very different portfolio of buildings in many cases because a lot of our buildings have a lot of gear in them, not so many people, a lot of equipment, churning away on electricity, creating heat, creating a lot of demand for cooling. So the percentage of water that's used for cooling is actually quite a bit higher in that portfolio typically. So that was our opportunity. So we started some projects, and we did this together with EDF. We said, let's try out let's see what happens. Let's engage with our facilities team. Let's engage with the experts in those fields. Let's try a few different things to see if we could build this business case. Because what we found was, because of the low cost, it's going to be tough to get their attention. So how do we find some options that can be compelling from a business standpoint, right? Because investment dollars, even for a company like AT&T, are very difficult to come by. So how do you make the case, let's invest in some of these things? And so we tried 3 tactics. One was a technical tactic. Essentially what that means is that we looked at, is there a piece of equipment that we could buy, that we can invest in, that would improve the efficiency of our operation? Maybe that's a filtration system at the end, maybe it's some water softening at the front. What again, this is where I gotta be careful because I'm not an engineer. So, but there were a lot of engineers who came to the table and said, these are some technical options you could consider. We also looked at operational, which essentially was the idea of if you measure something, if you make it something that people talk about, if you put targets in place, can you simply raise, it's like stepping on the scale if you're trying to lose weight. By making an operational awareness, can you drive efficiency there? And then the last one was looking at free air cooling, which is kind of a technical option, but really it was something that we felt merited its own attention because we perceived it had such a great opportunity not only for water but also for energy efficiency. How do you use air from the outside if it's cool enough instead of having to mechanically cool your water, your building? So we did a series of pilots. We went to those 125 buildings. We tried these techniques in and I think about 6 to 10, I think it was 10 facilities where we tried some of these things. And the results were partly encouraging and partly not so encouraging. We found that the operational thing, the stepping on the scale, didn't work that great. It didn't work that great. What we found was a lot of people actually were doing a pretty good job of putting that number into their awareness already. They kind of knew what they were doing. We had some pretty good facility managers as it turns out. So that was encouraging. It wasn't a behavior thing. But we did find that free air cooling and some technical solutions had some pretty compelling results. So I've got some examples up here. So on the technical side, we upgraded a filtration system, about $100,000. We were saving 60 grand a year. So that's less than 2 years to pay back. We can do that. If we had a free air cooling system, wasn't working quite right. Small investment in making that work right, $4,000. It returned 40. So we started finding that there are opportunities, and you guys, I'm sure, know this, right? Even with all the work that we've done, all the work that you've done, there are opportunities out there. So you've got to find them. So then the question becomes, how do you find them? How do you raise awareness? How do you create incentives to do it, right? Then it becomes a management challenge. If you found a couple financial responses that work, how do you create incentive to do it? So what we found was, I'm getting ahead of myself. when you look at all of the pilots, what we found was there's an opportunity for about 14 to 40% savings. Pretty good. And we're looking about, well, that's within our bill, so we apply that to our 125. What does that mean for us? We think it can do some good things. But in terms of raising awareness and driving other people to activity, what would happen if everybody in the United States started thinking about how to do this and integrating some of these tools into their portfolio? 28 billion gallons is what we came up with. We worked with EDF, we ran the math, we brought in some external experts. Say what you will about the number. It's whether we had to make some assumptions to get there, but we think they're pretty reasonable, and 28 billion is nothing to sneeze at, especially if you can do it at a financially viable and compelling rate. So this was our opportunity, right? And so EDF and AT&T, we grabbed hands and said, okay, great, now what? AT&T is going to go work on this thing. What else can we do together? We realized that while AT&T is a beneficiary of this kind of thing, there are a lot of companies, a lot of buildings for which what we found could be applied, right? You think about hospitals, you think about schools, you think about public buildings, think about malls, shopping, right? Lots of big buildings that need cooling, especially in Texas. So we're like, great, opportunity to expand. Now what? Well, here's where we kind of got ambitious. We took what we learned and we created an Excel-based toolkit that we feel that anyone who has a portfolio of buildings that has a cooling tower could use, potentially, to evaluate some of the options to reduce energy, reduce water, reduce chemical use to create a compelling business case for investment. So here's where I want you to get out your pencil or your pen. You don't have to, but if you would humor me, and write down this website address, because this is the website address that will take you to the website that has all the details about this toolkit. And we think it's fairly robust, actually, and we think it's fairly intuitive, but there are lots of resources on this toolkit. It's got the Excel spreadsheet, which is where you actually go in and you actually create a portfolio of your building, you put some information into the building, and it uses some pretty interesting external data to provide some options in terms of if you were to increase the efficiency of your cooling tower, you could expect this kind of energy, water, and chemical savings. It has some interesting information about freer cooling, which is probably less applicable here in Texas. But it takes a lot of information and spits out some information that you could use to make a business case. So it's got that in there, but it's got a toolkit, it's got a support guide that tells you how to use it. It's got, actually we did a webinar, so if you're more of a visual and audio learner, you could actually go listen to the webinar and kind of learn about how we were thinking about this thing. And we think it's a great opportunity to kickstart a water efficiency program in your portfolio of buildings. And here, so you're thinking to yourself, why are we talking about water, other than what Kate said and what we heard earlier about the interrelationship between them? Why are we talking about water so much? This is energy. Well, this is also an energy tool. At the end of the day, the toolkit also spits out information about how you can save energy costs, how you can save water costs, how you can save chemical costs. So that's where you get down to this whole, the big picture of energy water nexus that Kate touched on comes down to the building level too. To make a compelling water efficiency business case, you got to pull in other variables. You got to pull in energy. You got to pull in chemical costs. And so this tool attempts to cover all those bases. Is it the miracle pill? No. Is it a good start? Yes. I think what it has done for us is it starts conversations. It gets people to challenge you. It gets those engineers riled up because they say, I don't believe you. Let's scratch at that, which is great. They're scratching at it. So we think there's something there. And so we actually, this is not on this slide, but AT&T and EDF have worked together, and now we've actually shared this toolkit with another organization called GEMI, G-E-M-I. This is another third-party group that is all about making technical tools and they've made other water tools, energy tools. They're a great organization whose mission is to blast information and make it public. And GEMI has actually taken this thing. They found so much value in it. They said, I'd love to use this in our portfolio of tools. So we said, go for it. Take it, run with it, make it better, expand it, put it out there. So GEMI is doing that as well. The other thing I'll mention to you is Kate mentioned the EDF Climate Corps program, which if you don't know about it, it's a wonderful opportunity to bring smart, motivated people into your organization. What it does is it brings MBA students in the summertime, and they focus on a project for you. And we've used AT&T's used it for several years, and they come in and really dive into this thing. Well, during the EDF Climate Corps program last summer, I think it was last summer, Verizon, so he's our arch enemy, right? I hope we're all AT&T customers here. So anyway, but Verizon, as an EDF Climate Corps, said, water is important for us too. We're going to use the toolkit that our arch rival put together with EDF and look at it in our buildings, right? So I thought there was validation when the arch competitor says it's worth looking at as well. So anyway, I'm going to stop pitching it. Pitch is over, but I would encourage you to check it out. Kick the tires. Oh, it's totally free. Oh yeah, totally free. Totally free. Thank you. That's an important part. Thank you, Kate. Totally free. The results are what's meaningful for us. So anyway, enough of that. Back to AT&T and what we think this can mean for our own business. And this is, I alluded to it earlier, but about Kate and EDF's role in motivating the business. And as leaders in your own organizations, you probably are facing the same challenge, right? How do you motivate your business to make this a priority? Energy, water, resources, efficiency in general. How do you compete with the other priorities of the business? And one way we found to do that is through setting goals, right? Surprise, surprise, you measure something, then you set a goal to see your progress. And again, some of these are obvious, right? The first one is we're going to reduce water. We're going to 150 million gallons over the next few years, which represents a certain percentage, right? So that's water. That's an obvious one. I would suggest that maybe you consider doing something like that for your own operations. We also talked about energy, right? How does the energy that we save from the free air cooling exercise act as a motivator as well? So we set a goal related to that as well in terms of the 400 million kilowatt hours, right? Do a little math and then round up. That's what we did. We did a little math, we rounded up. EDF says we can round up higher. So that's what we did. Suppliers, AT&T is a big organization. We are supported by many, many vendors. And so we have some sway over those vendors. We work closely with our vendors, and so we recognize that a lot of our vendors use a lot of water too. So we engage with our vendors and say, how can you as a supplier think about water? How is it meaningful for your operation? And we'd like you to start setting goals as well, right? So that's another thing you might want to consider when you work with your vendors, whether it's a facilities management group, whether it's your water treatment group. Ask them questions about what they're doing. How are they setting goals within their organization to think about water and energy? The last one is what I'm doing today. Spreading the word. Spreading the gospel, right? How can we create awareness of the issue? How can we create awareness that buildings use a lot of water? And how can we raise awareness of the website and the toolkit that I just made you all write down? So we work together with EDF, and we target 5 water-stressed regions. Here it is, the map you've all seen, you all know. We're right there, red, yellow, very little non-red yellow in Texas. So for Texas, Dallas, and Houston were focus areas for us. How do you spread the word? How do you work with professional organizations? How do you work with city groups to get the information out? So that was another opportunity we had to spread the word and raise awareness. Any questions before I send off? You want to see the URL again, in case you missed it? Great. Thank you very much for having me here.